Okay, thank you. My name is Joe McWilliam. I've got a very varied background. Went deep sea on all sorts of ships, ended up in the North Sea in the early 80s on rigs and floating production things, and eventually ended up out in Southeast Asia, towed a rig out in 1994. And kind of stayed here with the Die Home project and went to Indonesia with an FPSO and ended up with Halim Marine on diving ships. Currently attending the wake on Halim Marine as it goes out of business, which is not happening very quick because nobody wants to buy anything. So anyway, about 2 years ago, I picked up on this eCMID as it was then, and got quite interested in it in the early days when it was being accreditation was starting, and kind of took it from there and more or less developed with the new system as it progressed. So today I'm going to one of the things that's in the training that's come up is a lot of the people that come to the training seem to be very vague about, some are very good, some are very vague about what they know about ISM, which initially surprised me. And we even had people who didn't know what it was, which was kind of scary. And some of the ones that didn't know what it was, they'd never seen it. So I raised this with the Institute and some discussions about it. Anyway, this came along, so I was asked to come and talk about ISM and how it interfaces sort of with eCMID. I'll keep it as interesting as I can. I'm not a great manufacturer of these presentations, I'm afraid, so bear with me. So it's not working, is it? This one? Yes. What's happening?
I don't know, Joe.
As I said, I'm not a great one with these things.
No, it's not your fault. Try now.
Okay. And also, excuse me if some of the slides look a little bit lonely because I did it on the square version, not the widescreen. Okay, so I have to be transmitted. So we'll get on. First of all, do a little bit of history, brighten it up a bit. ISM shouldn't just be taken in isolation as ISM code. There is a whole mass of stuff in there. And ISM is a sort of embodiment of what had been going on before, and some of it has gone on since. So we start out a little history lesson. Okay, hang on this. Many of the codes and regulations apply to the industry. Sadly, they usually arise from a disaster, which usually results in loss of life. It's a fact. And that's the way we learn, I suppose. So, for instance, this one here, ship sinking, and going right back to the beginning almost of the modern era, ships were being lost long before that, of course. Overloading of ships. Now, this goes back a long time. What was going on in the 19th century, in the 1800s, and long before that, and ships were being overloaded. Greed of the ship owners. But this man came along, and we know who he is. That's Samuel Plimsoll, yeah? British Member of Parliament. He described ships in those days as coffin ships. Maybe there's still some around. Okay, because they were so overloaded. In 1876, he managed to get through Parliament the Unseaworthy Ship Act through the British Parliament. Unfortunately, it didn't actually prescribe how ships were to paint the load line, where the owners were to put it. And it was reported at the time that some of them actually painted it on the funnel. Okay, yeah, it just shows the sort of disrespect that the owners had for the seafarers of the age. And it was costing lives. Okay, so he got it through, and we all know what it is today in varying forms depending on your class society. This is Lloyd's. But it wasn't until 1890 that he managed to get the Board of Trade to apply it properly. And so that was the first major piece of legislation of the modern era that was born, which ultimately became the International Convention on Load Line, which we all know. You'll see later on where this ties into ISM. And for his good work, he had a statue raised to him on the Victoria Embankment, and he became known as the sailor's friend. He was not a popular member of Parliament because most of the members of Parliament were involved with ship owners, and he actually got thrown out on a couple of occasions. However, we did eventually get what we got today. So that was full marks to Mr. Plimsoll. One of the early major accident events, and you've probably all seen the movie, I haven't got the music, was this one, the Titanic. I guess you've probably all seen the movie. Good as it was. So the Titanic was a notable milestone in the whole business. Flag UK, although some Americans actually believe it was an American ship, so we don't argue, we just let them believe it's an American ship. Okay. Well, maybe keep calm and carry on was a sort of British way in those days and age. She sailed on a maiden voyage from Southampton, as you probably know, in April 1912. Last port of call was Cove in Ireland. And she had 2,208 passengers and crew on board. On the evening of the 14th of April, she struck an iceberg, and she sank in the early hours of the 15th. 1,503 passengers and crew lost their lives, which gave a bit of shock to people of that day and age, especially as some of them were very wealthy. There were 20 lifeboats on board, could accommodate 1,178 people. There were between 2,208 and 2,224 souls on board. So we're short of about 1,000 spaces in the lifeboats. She had a maximum capacity with over 3,000 passengers and crew. But still, the lifeboats were only 1,178. White Star Line wanted fewer lifeboats on board so that they didn't obstruct the view of the passengers sitting on the boat deck. And also because they wanted the ship to look pretty. They could have had more lifeboats. They didn't. They weren't obliged to. She did comply with what such laws as there were at that time. She did comply. Obviously, the laws weren't adequate. As a result of Titanic, we got the one we all know today as SOLAS. So we got the load line, we got SOLAS. We're beginning to build up the modern picture of safety at sea. Next one that comes along. Now, oh, by the way, just in case you're asking, I don't remember those two. Okay. No, I was going to say, I don't remember those two. The next two I do actually remember, okay? The Torrey Canyon was a tanker, been jumboized a few times. Very old ship. Anybody remember the Torrey Canyon? Know about the Torrey Canyon? Yeah. Anyway, she was quite a big ship, but she'd been jumboized. And she was Liberian flag. Sailed from Mina. Actually, it was Mina in those days. It was changed to Mina al-Ahmadi later, okay, which I didn't know. On the 19th of February 1968, bound for Milford Haven in South Wales. Had a full cargo of crude oil, about 119,000 tons. On the 18th of March, the Torrey Canyon ran aground on Pollard's Rock on the Seven Stones Reef at the bottom corner of England. Okay, that's where it was for your geography lesson. She lost all her cargo. At the time, there was no real idea of what to do with it. Every day, there was tankers going around in those days, carrying oil up and down all over the place. If you went down the Red Sea in those days, as I did, you could smell it because they were washing their tanks into the Red Sea, and you could smell the crude oil as you went down the Red Sea. Okay, there was no controls. It was inevitable that eventually one of these ships was going to have a serious accident. It was bound to happen. And this was it. There was a huge amount of pollution. Okay, that was the area it covered, the pollution. Okay. The crew were all saved. There was one loss of life. It was a member of the salvage team that tried to get her off the rocks, a Dutchman, I believe. He was killed during that operation. But other than that, the crew got off. And it wasn't just in the environment, and even today, people don't really understand if you damage the environment, there is an economic down. You lose money. People don't knit the two together. In this case, tourism was damaged, the fishing industry was damaged, and although there was no loss of life, this is all a bit sad. All these little guys didn't do too well. All right. So that was a Torrey Canyon. The UK government did fly Buccaneer, which was state-of-the-art jets in those days, from our Naval Air Station Lossiemouth in northern Scotland with napalm to try and burn it. And they bombed it with little success, actually, which didn't give you a lot of confidence in the Fleet Air Arm at the time, because they had great difficulty making it burn. And it wasn't going to work anyway. But they did try that. In the end, they lost all the oil, and some of it's still around on the Channel Islands to this day. Anyway, as a result of the Torrey Canyon, another long overdue piece of legislation came into effect, MARPOL. Okay, so now we have load line, we have SOLAS, we've got MARPOL. So it's getting better, providing people do what they're supposed to do. So the next one is directly involved with ISM, the Herald of Free Enterprise. Now, how many people remember that one or know about that one? Okay. This was the Herald of Free Enterprise. Roll on, roll off, passenger car ferry, nearly 8,000 tons. UK flag again. Don't want you to think we're all bad in the UK, we're not, but we had our share of disasters. Sailed from Zeebrugge bound for Dover on the night of the 6th of March, 1987. 459 passengers, 80 crew. About 22 minutes after leaving the berth at Zeebrugge, traveling at around 16 to 18 knots, the bow doors open, the Herald of Free Enterprise car decks flooded, the vessel rolled over onto her side and came to rest on a sandbank just outside the port. Reports vary a little bit about how long it took to roll 90 degrees. It was said to be about 90 seconds, although some people say it was around 4 minutes. It wasn't very long. And there she is. I remember this one well. I was at home and I saw most of this happening on television. 193 passengers and crew lost their lives. The UK Department of Transport ordered an inquiry into the loss of the free enterprise, which was held by a judge, Mr. Justice Sheen, later Lord Justice. A report followed, which was particularly critical of certain members of the crew, and even more so concerning the company, Townsend Torrenson. And these are parts from the report. At first sight, the faults which led to this disaster were the aforesaid errors of omission on the part of the master, who incidentally lost his certificate for 2 years, and the chief officer, who lost his certificate for 1 year, and the assistant boatswain, and also the failure of the captain to issue and enforce clear orders. The boatswain, by the way, was responsible for closing the bow doors. A full investigation into the circumstances leads inexorably to the conclusion that the underlying or cardinal faults lay higher up in the company. So often in these disasters, it's easy, and same with planes, I think, it's easy to blame the pilot or blame the captain. Very often they're dead. Okay? Very few times, it's getting better that the blame actually goes where it, up the tree where it actually probably belongs. The board of directors did not appreciate their responsibility for the safe management of their ships. They did not apply their minds to the question, what orders should be given for the safety of our ships? The directors did not have any proper comprehension of what their duties were. That's scary. This was a big, well-known company, and frankly, they didn't know what they were doing. And this ship sailed with bow doors open. There was very little training, very little instruction, very little good on-ship management. Some of the relieving masters, I think there was 4 masters to assign to each ship. Some of the masters had actually raised issues with the company. Brick wall. And all concerned in management, from the members of the board of directors down to the junior superintendents, were guilty of fault in that all must be regarded as sharing responsibility for the failure of management. I guess today there would have been corporate manslaughter charges. In those days, there wasn't. So the master lost his license for 2 years. The chief mate lost his license for 1 year. These people, nothing. And this is really damning. From top to bottom, the body corporate was infected with the disease of sloppiness. And those kind of words from a British judge are very, very harsh. It's not the sort of language they are given to using, unless they really mean it. As a result of the Herald Free Enterprise, another step along the road to make ships safer was taken, where we are now, the ISM Code. IMO latched onto this and said, we have these other rules, but the management is not working, either on the ship, on shore, together, more importantly, together, it's not working. And it's going to happen again. And IMO realized that, and they got together and they produced the ISM Code, which we have today. Now, it's been revised and reissued, I think, about 4 or 5 times since it was out. And this is it here. I always carry a copy around with me when I attend these events in training, largely because some people have never seen it. That's today's version.
Where did we get hold of a copy of that, Joe?
I bought this one in one of the local chart places. I can't remember which one. Yeah, chart
You
cut.
download it.
Yeah. That's what the latest edition looks like. Came into force on the 1st of July 1998 for passenger ships, oil tankers, chemical tankers, gas carriers, bulk carriers, and cargo high-speed craft, 500 tons and above. Okay. I'm not quite sure why there was a delay in getting it to the other cargo ships. But anyway, I was actually in Singapore in 1998 doing a refit on an FPSO when this came out. And it was widely appreciated. A lot of work to get it done. But one thing, the ISM Code was actually only doing or preaching what the good ship owners and the good managers have been doing for years, managing their ships safely and effectively. And it was going after the people that weren't. Now, one would have, and don't judge by name, because one would have expected a company like Townsend Torrenson to be a reputable manager. So the name actually didn't mean a lot. So there was good managers amongst companies that were probably not so highly respected wrongly in the domain, and yet the bigger companies were not doing the right thing. I was lucky in my career. See, I worked for companies, and I'll go back to, I couldn't remember the actual year, but it was late 60s when I was working for a New Zealand shipping company, which is part of the P&O group, and we actually had a management system in 1968. So good companies were doing the right thing. However, they weren't killing people. And of course, the ISM Code belongs in SOLAS. So it all comes together. The part that really interests us, I haven't really got time to go into the whole thing. It's not a big book, but it's part A, in the implementation, which is only 8 pages, 12 sections, okay? Sorry. Part A. So we got the general definitions, objectives, application, and the functional requirements of a management system. This isn't rocket science. This is common sense. This is easy stuff. You don't have to write 10 pages of procedures for opening the forecastle hatch, because nobody's going to read it. It has to be what people can use. And Jolly Jack on deck, he is not going to read all this stuff if it's in the form of war and peace. It's going to be meaningless. Safety and environmental protection policy, well, okay. Company responsibilities and authority, so they nailed that one down pretty quick. They don't, it's not just, not the captain and his crew that's going to get nailed every time. They're going to go after the company. Designated person, this was the link between the ship and the office. Sometimes misused, or not misused, what's the word? Not understood what a DP, or we commonly call DPA, what a DPA is supposed to do. All right? He is not the company safety manager. A lot of people think he is the safety manager. He is not. The DPA is the link to top man. He's got a line to the boss. So there's no blockages in between. That's the idea. The master's responsibility and authority. Resources and personnel, make sure they've got enough materials and people to do everything. Shipboard operations. So we're going to have procedures how to do things to make them safe. Emergency preparedness. Reports and analysis on non-conformities, accidents, and hazardous occurrences. Maintenance of the ship and equipment. Documentation. Company verification, review, and evaluation. That's not a lot of stuff, really, is it? It's very, very simple stuff. But for the purposes of this presentation, and well, we did have time constraints, but I'm told I've got a lot more time to talk. And this part probably says it all, okay? The objectives of the code are to ensure safety at sea, prevention of human injury or loss of life, avoidance of damage to the environment, in particular to the marine environment and property. Okay? So, 3 bells ring loud and clear, don't they? Okay? So this brings it all together on how we should be managing our ships. The safety management objectives of the company should inter alia, everybody know what that means? It's a sort of legal term. I had to look it up. I thought I knew. It means amongst other things. So it's not narrow, it's wide. Provide for safe practices in ship operation and a safe working environment, which they didn't have on the Herald of Free Enterprise. How could they possibly sail with the bow doors open and traveling at 18 knots in the North Sea? You've got to have your marbles loose. As it turns out, the assistant boatswain who's supposed to shut the doors was sleeping. Assess all identified risks to its ships, personnel, environment, and establishment of appropriate safeguards. When ISM first came out, it was people embraced it, and most people I was around, and they did it properly. As time went on, it was seen as a lucrative business. Okay, it became less of a must-have, less of a want-to-have, and more of a must-have. Tick in the box. Okay, so instead of being committed to doing it, we just wanted to have it so that when people came to check your certificates, oh, we got a box, we got a tick. Okay, and there were numerous small organizations around the place who would chuck you out an ISM management system for a few dollars. They might never have seen your ship. Oh, it was good business. I wish I'd been in it, actually, because some of them made a lot of money out of manufacturing ISM management systems for ships they'd probably never seen. I'll give you a couple of examples. I saw one management system for an offshore vessel, okay, which will remain nameless, that discussed the use of inert gas on board. You all know what inert gas is and its use on tankers. Yeah, well, incredible, I couldn't believe it. That management system had been approved by a class society. So since 1998 to this day and age, have we actually gone forward or backwards? I saw another one that said that in the case of an oil spill, they should call Aberdeen. This was for a ship working locally here, an offshore vessel. Again, it was a system that had been approved by a class society. But the interesting one there is assess all identified risks. This came in a bit later. You're supposed to risk assess your vessel, identify all the hazards, and then produce your procedures to mitigate all these hazards. That's what you're supposed to do. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. People don't do it. Very few people take their ship, go on board. If you transfer a ship from one owner to another, they will just simply take your management system comes off, their management system goes on. They haven't looked at the risks that they're buying, because they've got a management system that fits all their ships, all 50 of them or whatever. They're not the same. Continuously improve safety management skill of personnel ashore and aboard ships, including for emergencies related both to safety and environmental protection. The safety management system should ensure compliance with mandatory rules and regulations. So we've now said, yes, we're going to comply with MARPOL, we're going to comply with SOLAS, which you have to do anyway. Okay, and the other ones, STCW and a few others. So it binds it together. So it's not just a question of getting a certificate and doing that. How do you do it? You know, how do you have your oil spill kit? All right, we've got a kit there. Opened it up. Oh, yeah, 3 buckets, 2 spades, and a bucket of sand. Yeah, but how do your crew deal with this oil spill that's scudding around your deck and headed for the sea? Well, let's throw sand on it. Okay, and then what do you do with the sand? So what it's saying is, you have to have this stuff in place. So it's not a tick in the box. You've got to do it. That applicable codes, guidelines, and standards recommended by the organization, administrations, classification societies, and maritime industry organizations are taken into account. So maritime industry organizations, I'd like to include IMCA in that. There's a lot of safety stuff in IMCA for our vessels. All right, so that should be taken into account. Most of the stuff, if you go to the bottom of that page, is IMO stuff, I have to say, a lot of it. All right. So we're back to this one now, Common Marine Inspection Document. So where does it fit together? So the contents are vessel particulars, previous inspections. The brackets at the end are the number of sections, okay? Index of certificates, 55. Safety management system. Now, stop there. Are we thinking that this applies to section 5 and nothing else? Wrong. Health and safety environment. Security. Crew management. Crew qualifications. Life-saving appliances. Firefighting appliances. Pollution prevention. General appearance. Bridge navigation and communications equipment. Machinery space. Mooring, towing, and lifting equipment. Construction and stability. So if an AVI thinks that the only one that matters is number 5, the safety management system is the only part that's ISM, wrong. ISM embraces it all right? Because remember what it says? All applicable codes and all that. So I do have a little bit of surprise when I've got some potential AVIs sitting in front of me, and you ask them if they've seen it, and they say they've never seen it. It's a bit disconcerting, but it's happened. I promise you it's happened. And it happens nearly every course I take. Anybody going tomorrow? Anybody going tomorrow? Anybody for training tomorrow? You know I asked this question. Right. So, list of contents for M149 on the previous slide. It can be seen quite clearly that they relate very closely to the requirements stated in the ISM Code 1.2.1. All right, all those things are to do with safety, environment, protection, loss of life, damage. Okay. Turning to the eCMID, I've got to get this E in there. eCMID itself. The eCMID inspection and audit process is not undertaken to assess a vessel's suitability, as we've already said. Many of the applications that come in are full of suitability studies, but very little ISM, safety, direct. Okay, they say it's suitable to do this job. That's not what it's about. I think Mike said earlier. It's not suitability for an industrial operation. Rather, its aim is to enable an assessment of the vessel's operating safety status by examining all aspects of the safety management system. That's a tall order, because some of these management systems are huge. I don't think they're any better for being huge, but some of them are big. And you've got maybe a day, 2 days to do an eCMID. It's not a long time. You cannot go through a whole management system in that time. All right? But you get a pretty good idea reasonably quickly when you go and have a look and ask a few pointed questions. Is this ship actually doing the right thing or not? Okay? Many are, some aren't. Like all such audits, the eCMID process provides a snapshot. You can only get a snapshot of what you're doing. You don't have time to go through the whole management system and audit it. You've got to come away with an opinion based on what you've seen. And if you happen to ask a couple of questions, for instance, if you say, safety meeting, Captain, when was your last safety meeting? Wait a minute, I'll go and look. Hey, you don't know when you did your last safety meeting? So you probably want to explore that one a little bit further. So you can tailor your own questions. You can get a very good impression with a couple of pointed questions. If the captain doesn't know when his last safety meeting was, well, show me the minutes of the last safety meeting. Chief mate, where's the? Oh, so you get there's ways and means of doing this. Anyway, but it's still only a snapshot. The ISM code does not apply to small workboats, but it does say this. This document contains supplementary sections for different types of vessels and may be used for inspecting any type of vessel covered in the EISM criteria, i.e. less than 500 tons gross and less than 24 meters. They're not required to comply with the International Management System or ISPIS. Although it does say this, principles outlined within the two codes are worth following.
There's an exemption there, Joe, too, in that high-speed craft go under the ISM Code are generally less than 500 gross tons.
Sorry?
High-speed craft.
Oh, right.
So I mentioned crew boats earlier on. Crew boats go under the high-speed code, most of them, and they're under 500 gross tons.
Yeah, okay, that's right. So you do your best. So what have we got? We got an ISM code, which has started out well. I fear that unless people like us push it along in CMID and apply it as best we can and preach the gospel, as it were, it is rapidly becoming a tick in the box. People, even class surveyors, don't have time to audit when they're doing their annual audits and that, a whole ISM management system. But one feels, to be honest, that the ones I've mentioned, where they're talking about inert gas on an offshore vessel, that when that was approved by that particular class society, I just felt that they should have picked that up and looked deeper, because that particular management system was not designed for an offshore vessel. It just wasn't. So what good was it to the crew? Practically nothing.
Well, if you're a cynical person, you would say that you're taking the legality or the responsibility, the legal responsibility for the safety of the people out of the company and putting it back onto the ship.
Sorry?
If you're a cynical person, you would say that the whole ISM system is a way of taking responsibility away again from the management company and putting it onto the ship.
That's right. So,
you don't do these forms, if you don't do this, then you can be decriminalised.
That's right.
So nothing has changed. Actually, nothing has changed.
We've gone the full circle.
Samuel Clinton.
We've gone the full circle, and it will always be that way.
Yeah. It's up to us to fight against
Well,
it.
it's up to us. It's up to us. It's up, and I've worked with captains who have complained bitterly
Me too.
about not about their management system, about the lack of when they say, "Hey, this is wrong." We now do one of the procedures that gets ignored a lot is management of change. All right, it's really a critical procedure that
Most people don't know what it is.
you're right. It's a critical procedure that most people don't pay much attention to. You know, we just change it. It's going to work better this way. They don't say, yeah, but do we need to train people to make it work differently? Do we need to re-risk assess it? In most cases, you do. Okay. Classic case was one in the North Sea, where the helicopter deck on a semi was designed for a Super Puma. Okay. That's maximum. And that's what they always got, was a Super Puma. Okay. One fine day, they sent one of the smaller ones, which I think was a Sikorsky 76. Sikorsky 76. Okay. On the Super Puma, people used to walk around the heli deck in front of the thing, provided you didn't touch the radar, get burnt. You could walk under the rotors. It was so high up. Okay. And that was fine. They used to go and get the baggage out, throw it off. Then one fine day, a Sikorsky 76 came in. And one unfortunate, and they did an exercise, which I still don't really understand. It was a bit windy, apparently, and the pilot powers it down. Anybody understand that?
It's like in reverse thrust.
Yeah, anyway, he powers it down to hold it in this wind. I think it's stopped for fuel or so. It wasn't a regular visitor. Unfortunately, a guy walked around the front of a Sikorsky 76 and he didn't get to the other side because his head was gone. Now, nobody risk assessed it. It wasn't, the procedures were only for a Super Puma. There was no catering for a different helicopter. We get Super Pumas, that's it. One guy dead, and a lot of blood and brains to hose off the heli deck. So management of change is important. I've seen there's no reason not to change things. That's the essence of good management. Is change. It's great, but manage it, and that's a procedure that is. We're digressing a little bit now, but that is one procedure that I've always been hot on. I can tell you now, in the last 10 years that I've been doing my particular function, right? Not quite actually. I did marine pure earlier, but from safety, I think it was about 8-9 years. All right? I wrote the management of change procedure. Do you know how many times I've had one come in? Because on the thing I had check class, check drawings, check training, check this, check. But I wrote it. Do you know how many I had? Any guesses? 4. Don't ignore it. But what I'm saying is getting back to the ISM, great, but it's got to be done. And you've got to preach it, you know, and when we go on board, we shouldn't be, I'm digressing a little bit now, most masters are on side. I really believe that. Most masters are on side because their neck is on the line. Most masters are on side and they want to do it. Getting back to the Herald of Free Enterprise, that mentality onshore, by the way, I'm a mariner, it still exists, it's still alive and well. It's difficult to change, but that's what we've got to do. So I'm not an expert on ISM. I applied it since it came out. I believe in it. I preach it to my superiors. I preach it to my subordinates. If you really want to know a lot more about it, I don't get any money for this, by the way. I do recommend this book by a gentleman called Professor Phil Anderson. Okay, it's not cheap. It cost me, I think this third edition cost me about 120 quid or something. Not cheap, but I like the topic. I actually think his second version was better, but anyway, I had to update it because of the changes. If you've got the time and the inclination to read more, I do recommend it. It's very, very good. And you know I produce this at every training session as well. But not many people have got time to read it. And there have been, and it's got legal cases where we've gone to court where ships have been found guilty of not following the ISM. One case in the North Sea was where a ship dragged up a subsea cable, expensive, dragged his anchor across the cable. When they went, and of course they started to look for people to pay the bill. So the lawyers get hold of it, and lawyers being lawyers, they managed to dig in. They turn all the stones over because somebody's going to carry the can, right, when the law gets in. And they found out that the chart wasn't up to date. Then they went back and they traced it all the way back to they weren't doing the management system, did not have a good procedure for maintaining up-to-date charts. Ship owner, pay the bill. Okay, and there are lots of cases, very interesting cases. Car carriers going on fire in the Gulf, and lots of good cases, well worth a read. But ISM is important, but it's global. It's not that. How to manage our ships safely. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got to do. Finish. Lunchtime. Yeah, seriously, any questions?
I have a question for you, Joe. One of the things since I came into this whole business as a non-marine person 3 years and a bit ago, the thing I find most distressing is I get all of these feeds every day coming through my computer, telling me about this ship's gone down, this incident has happened, people dying every day at sea. Now, is that because they are not applying ISM, or is it because they are applying it, but things happen at sea and we just have to live with that?
No, I don't think we have to live with it or die with it, whichever one you want to do. If people die at sea from the result of an accident, or even die as a result of ill health, you know, were they fit to go in the first place? Happens. You know, in my time at sea, I had 4 deaths, I think, and at least 2 of those guys probably shouldn't have been there, but they had a medical. Because in those days, it was a standing joke that you went for your Shipping Federation medical and you spoke in this ear, and that was good enough. If you said, yes, I hear you, you were good to go. Go. Okay? No, I don't think we have to accept it. But then you get into the reporting. Another procedure is reporting accidents. Most people don't want to report accidents because either there's a blame game going on from onshore, which puts the fear element into it. And there's a lot of that goes on. Oh, you've had another accident. Why have you had another accident? Well, you know.
Safety is a blameless culture.
Yeah.
It is. It should be.
It's not. You know, I mean, we fight against it all the time. It's to do with awareness. People that own ships these days are nothing different from what they were before, banks and stuff. You just have to struggle and embrace and mentor. You would say yes.
I don't think there's any.
You're losing battle, not.
I don't think there's any reason why anybody
Promoting awareness.
should die at sea. I mean, yes, we will have accidents. We will continue. The point is, what do we do when we've had the accident? You know, or the difference between a fatality and a near miss is this far. Right? If I'm standing here and it falls there, it's a near miss, and then it's reported. Never mind, it's only a box fell off. I had one a few years ago. This frozen chicken fell out of. Hilarious. Everybody thought it was hilarious. The frozen chicken incident. That's Joe with his frozen chicken. However, I don't know if you've ever picked up a box of frozen chickens. Not good. Falling from 10 meters in the air, even worse. But they thought it was hilarious. However, had the guy been standing here and a box of frozen chickens fell on his head, he'd be dead.
So just without being controversial, because I've had this conversation actually with somebody yesterday, but also in the last few months. The suggestion that one of these ships carrying 20,000 containers eventually is going to come to grief, or one of these fantastic cruise ships now carrying 5,000 passengers and 1,000 crew is going to come to grief. So we have to wait for that to happen before the next version of ISM comes. And
Already
to me,
happened. Passenger ships, rather than container ship on the ground, it's already happened.
Well, no, I'd like to think that that we don't have to wait for it to happen, that somebody will pick up on something going wrong or not being managed effectively beforehand. Inevitably, human beings being what they are, you're going to get some dumb cluck like the one in Italy that decided to go and wave to his mate on the beach on the Pazzi boat. I can't remember the name of the ship now. Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with idiots? You know, I mean, he shouldn't have been on the ship. I also think, I don't know, I never found the outcome. Was he smoking wacky back? Was he wacky backy as well? Was he on the drink or drugs as well? I can't remember. There was something about him anyway. I think he had a lady as well. But no, I mean, you can't cater to idiots. The only way you can cater to idiots is to identify these idiots before the company puts them in command of one of their ships, or try to. It's not impossible.
I also say it's the flag state as well. ISM code is there internationally, but how flag states determine what the code is. You go to Panama, you go to St. Vincent's, Marshall Islands, to the UK standard, to the Australian standard. Surveyors want more information for ISM code, so it's flag states must implement on their own ships.
Yeah.
Not certification.
Right, and
Well, you've got the grey list, you've got the black list, and the white list.
but again, there's good flag states and mediocre flag states. I'm not going to say bad, because I'm not sure I'm speaking to. But there are some flag states are not so bad. I mean, at the end of the day, the flag state is not managing the ship. The owners are, or the ship managers. The flag state might accept whatever they get, right? Might accept whatever they get if class, it's usually class stamps it, like safety management system. But at the end of the day, trace it all back. It's the owners and ship managers are running the ship. Flag state's not running the ship.
They issue the DOC.
Sorry?
Say the DOC is issued by the flag state that the compliance to the code.
Yeah.
And I said before, I had 3 Panama ships that were not accepted by the UK because the ISM code was insufficient to what they wanted. Whereas the MCA want a good code, offering a good standard, but certain flags have a low standard of the ISM code, won't be accepted. Like the oil companies now won't use the grey list, okay? Won't use ships on the grey list. Simple as that, because the standard is so low. And then you've got the class societies, they come in with 2 hats on. They come in as the DNB, ABSDB, he's doing a survey, next day come in with flag state hat. There's a conflict of interest in various ways.
Well,
but the flag states are responsible for issuing a DOC, which your ISM code been accepted to the level of the
But that, it wasn't always like that. That was a cost-cutting exercise, wasn't it? Years and years ago. I mean, it used to be the class and Department of Trade in UK in my day were actually originally doing the same thing, but there was different surveyors doing it, going back, you know, before Noah's Ark, no, after Noah's Ark. But they will do what they have to do. I mean, there's some class surveyors are very good, but again, they're limited about what they can actually do in the time. And the DOC, the last one I saw done, I mean, the books were all stacked up on an office desk. Basically, that was it. And it was like, same with one of my favorites is the garbage management plan. You know, it's something, it's a great idea, especially when all this stuff we're getting now about 2050, there'll be more, the weight of plastic in the oceans will be heavier than the fish. But you know, I actually believe most mariners, or the ones I've met, conform rigidly, do very well. Okay, but when they get to the beach, what do they do with their rubbish? Right? There's no, they haven't gone as far as making people do something to dispose of it onshore. It's a long way to go. Our ships in Loyang, religiously, and if they don't do it, they get nailed. On one of my inspections, they religiously separate their plastic, their food waste, their or paper and everything. You've got lots of bins. What do they do next? Do you know? They take it all up to the jetty, the skip there, all goes in the same skip. That's it. So, you know, these guys said, Joe, why the hell should we do this? You know, what would you say to these? You said, we're doing our part. What's everybody else doing? That's what happens. And if you ask certain people in Loyang, what do you do with it next? You don't. I've never had an answer yet. What they actually do with it. But I mean,
they've stopped separating it from being incinerated. Used to go to landfill and be separated. Now it's all incinerated. That's why they put it all in the one.
But incinerating is not the answer either, because incinerating pollutes the atmosphere. When you burn, you know, this plastic is polluting at every stage along the way. When you manufacture it, when you use it, when you dump it, when you burn it, it's just one history of pollution somewhere. So incinerating, yeah, but you've got to breathe it next.
This is Asia.
So, you know,
It'll take time.
I saw a program last night about the green turtle in Cyprus. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Well, they got this green turtle and they opened it up. Then they got in the contents of his gut. They put it out and they started picking out all the little bits of plastic. It's not good. And then in the end, we're going to eat this. Sorry.
Joe, just a quick question on what you've
Oh,
summarized.
I like quick questions, quick answer.
Most of these codes have come in and around incidents of either British flag vessels or the UK Coast Line. Liberian flag, yes. But I want to ask you, in that context, there are enough incidents here with the Korean ferry Seoul, where a 70-year-old master, the Costa Concordia, where you just mentioned about a black master probably too eager to show off to his pole dancing girlfriend what he can do, maneuvering skills. I think there is a hole, I want your views on it, in the ISM system, where the mentoring of the master or the controls over the command is not as tight or as scrutinized as it ought to be, particularly so from the shore side of it, which is what ISM set out to be. Do you think there is one perspective?
Okay, I go back a while now. I was being sent to one of the first gas carriers called the Norman Lady, which is an 88,000 cubic meter LNG ship, and that was a company that was probably not the top line in those days, but it was to me, it's a job actually. But anyway, I went to them and they said, okay, you've got a bit of gas experience, we'll put you on the ship. They actually sent me to Harley Street. You know where Harley Street is? It's in London. It's one of the top flight medical. Ordinary humans do not go there. Okay? This is for other people who drive big cars and everything else. And they sent me to see a Harley Street psychiatrist. Seriously. I was amazed because I felt okay. Right? But they did that to all their senior officers. They sent them to this Harley to see that they were actually okay. As it turns out, I thought the Harley Street psychiatrist was crazier, much crazier than I was ever likely to be. But that's, they did. A company called Murray's Marks, that was.
Leadership training is.
But when I got my command, I was taken up to the head office for 2 days. But I know now we recruit masters. Short of a master on X ship, we go get us a master from somewhere, Eastern Europe, whatever, cheaper than British and Australia. Get us a master. Up he comes. The company have never seen this guy. Never seen him. Never spoken to him. So you got the superintendent's never spoken to him. Nobody's spoken to him. On a plane out to Singapore. That's your ship. That's it. They don't know who he is. They don't even know if the guy has a criminal record. They don't know anything about him. But that's going on as we speak, every day.
So does it need to have an
Well, exactly. But it's going on every day.
It can't happen. So what's going to happen?
Well, that's why we have CMID and OVIDs and all this
We
stuff.
can only contribute. We can't govern it. We as CMID people can only contribute and hopefully make, for our little corner of the industry, make it better. That's all we can hope to do. And if we come away from a job, say, well, I think I've done the best I can and made it a little bit better today, then you can sleep well. But if you come away frustrated and feel you basically signed off on something and you didn't bother to check, or you didn't have time to check, more often the case, you can only do what you can do. You know, we're not all gods.
My question is, opening up with the UK flag vessel. I've been involved in two vessels. One of them at the MEIB report has already come out on that vessel, UK flag vessel, come out of Jebel Ali Channel at 10.9 knots, hit a loaded tanker head on within 1 mile of the fairway point outside the channel. Now, again, the bottom line is master's competency in question. The pilot gets over 2 buoys away and 1 mile into the channel, he hits something as big as a tanker. Is the industry reactive towards putting codes in place? And what do you think, talking of the past history of how these codes have come in place? And there have been a series of things, of incidents, which I told you about the Costa, the Seoul ferry, the Ever Smart. It's up in public domain. If anybody wants to read it, it's Ever Smart British, like London registered vessel at 10.9 hitting the Alexandra 1. There's another one which we're dealing in, and it's still ongoing, so I won't mention the name. Grounded off the UAE coastline. There is from frame 108 to 116, entire bottom is ripped open. Again, mainland UK registered vessel. Now, what I'm saying is, there is a serious lapse, and I can tell you from claims, I'm an accident investigating person who's been practicing for 14 years now, that there is a clear master's competency question mark that is coming in more and more. And looking at what the industry has been going through for the last few years and how the junior officers are being promoted at the speed at which they're promoted, this problem is only going to escalate before there are more lives lost or more oil is spilled. What, in your opinion, or who, in your opinion, needs to talk about this? Is it to be talked at the IMO? Do the flag states need to address it more? Do we need to talk to the Ship Owners Association or IMCA? Because I can tell you, as at least my personal experience, I don't know if my colleagues in this room understand or are putting a map of this, there is a big question mark, not just the master, it's senior officers in general. There are engine room incidents as well. We just heard Hull Machinery underwriter yesterday say 40% of his H&M claims are constituted to engine room oriented claims. So there is, in my view, a trend. So for the common good, in your view, if we have to talk to somebody, who should it be as a starting point? Do you think MCA? Because I've just mentioned two flag, UK flag vessels.
If we all right, we have STCW, right, which is supposed to take care of the competency of our people.
Minimum standards. Down the trains, the minimum
Right,
standards.
but we have that. But if we're saying now that we have, a person gets qualified for whatever job. The STCW job, here's your ticket, off you go, take a ship, right? If we're now saying, which I agree with you because I've seen it, that some of our senior officers and masters and in some cases engineers, you know, across the board, if we're now saying that the modern generation are littered or getting persons who are actually not qualified or not getting competency, qualified, in different things, or experience, if the standard is not good enough to keep our ships safe, then all these bodies that you mentioned should get themselves back to IMO and say, hey, IMO, we have this problem going across the international shipping industry, that our senior people, although they get the qualifications, they are not good enough to avoid another disaster. If that is the case, then all these bodies, class, flags, MCA, should get themselves back, raise it with IMO. We need to get a conference together. What are we going to do about it? Not wait for the accident. But I promise you, that's not going to happen, is it? But if we're, I've heard this said many times. I hear it in particular with DPOs actually, that they can't handle the ship when it's not on DP. I think
the way one perhaps method could be that because people don't have the competency at that rank before they take over the responsibility and duties, perhaps a minimum time at that rank before you're promoted to the next rank. So if a third officer has been third officer for 3 years in his discharge book, then he can move up to second officer for 2 years, and then chief officer has to sail on his discharge book at a minimum of 24 months before he's considered for master.
That's already there. That already exists, but it's not. It's been cut down and made less stringent in the last 10 years.
I think, but if you look at the air industry, quite different. No? I used to smile at the aircraft industry because I used to walk around ships to see hydraulic leaks all over the bloody deck. It used to piss me off. Sorry. So it used to get me angry, okay? And I used to say to the owners, how come that we've got to have hydraulic oil leaking all over our deck? It's only a simple coupling. I bet these things flying around up there don't have hydraulic oil leaks, or these things ain't going to work. So what's the big deal? You know, it's true. So, you know, but unless they get together and talk, but at the moment, if they're working in isolation, and I do agree. I think, Mike, you might know something about it. You've probably heard more of it than I have. Senior DPOs and that I've heard from comments. I won't use the word complaint, that they can't handle the ship. They don't get off the sticks. They don't.
That's masters as well these days.
Yeah, they just can't do it.
They've got so much power and so many clusters. They've never been challenged to do it.
That's right. So if it's there, then IMO, it needs to go to IMO. IMO are the head people. They're supposed to handle this. But it'll take 10 years before it gets back to us. That's the thing.
I think that's the wrong approach, Joe, because as you know, to get anything for IMO, it takes it.
Exactly.
I mean, an operations manager, a company should know that these ships are being driven by competent people and experienced people. If you look at MERS supply persistence, it's in their manuals that their captains have to give stick time to their junior.
Yeah, but you don't see much of that.
But how do you get the client to do that? Like they won't give you the time to do it.
Oh.
It's just impossible.
See, the thing is, at the moment, there's a shortfall of over 20,000 seafarers to actually man the thousands of vessels that are plowing the oceans at this moment in time. So all they'll do is they'll go to the lowest form of common denominator and get the cheapest crews they possibly can.
Exactly
That's why they go to China now. That's why they go to different countries like you know.
Yeah. Okay.
West Africa.
We won't specify which countries.
So explain what you see. It's only going to get worse.
I think we're also in for structural change. I think if you look at the disruptive change that's going to happen in shipping in the next 10 years with semi-autonomous vessels, you'll never get autonomous vessels. Semi-autonomous vessels, you would dumb down competency, you would have operators just to look after active craft. Because if you take the human element out of shipping, 99% of it, you won't have an accident. collision I'm talking about. 99%, because that 1% act of God, you're going to have a human being there. So I think as time evolves, you will see a disruptive change in shipping.
Right. The other thing is behavioural safety, which is not much talked about, but at the end of the day, human being is driven by behaviours, right? And they do strange things for no apparent reason. I'll tell you one incident, which is a competent officer, in ordinary terms, who stood at the radar and allowed his ship to hit a beacon in Malaysia.
Consciously.
Because he was looking in the radar, in front of him was a helideck with supports, right? And he didn't move away from the radar. And that support, okay, calm weather, clear night, no problem. That support was actually blocking out the light on the concrete beacon. If he'd stepped this way, or this way,
Chicken on his head,
he would have seen it. Right?
Have a chicken on his head.
But seriously, in days gone by, guys moved around. Now they get stuck in one spot and they're welded to the deck. This guy moved a little bit sideways, would have seen the light, but actually he grabbed his way into this beacon and smacked the ship.
It's the same, Joe, with DP incidents now. If you have a DP incident, the first thing you ask the operator was, what did you see? And they'll tell you, what about what you saw on the screen? Say, did you look at the window?
Don't look out window.
Don't use this anymore.
You know, one idea could be to like follow the passenger industry. They've got cameras on the bridges, they've got cameras in the engine room, they've got cameras on the generator flats. So no matter what happens on board the ship, if there's an incident, the cameras record everything. And I think if navigators or engineers on watch know that there's somebody actually watching them, which is linked to the SVDR, you can guarantee that incidents and accidents perhaps just might come down.
That exists. That's currently on board my ships.
Yeah. Did it bring accidents down?
No. Not
There's so much screens that control them instead of walking around in.
Everything's recorded 24 hours a day. It doesn't reduce that.
There are nav audits that are happening in PDR screenings offsite, and there are findings, but they're not.
I think it purely comes down to lack of training, lack of experience, lack of leadership skills, and lack of people on board so that you can do that training. You can't, like, you look at just recently, the last couple of years being a seas master, you get into the crew mess and 3 or 4 people are on a ship with 20 or 30 crew because they're all on rotation, they're all working. There's no other extra officer sit or watch, or you get guys straight out of school, straight into a DPO position, do the minimum training. All of a sudden they're on watch by themselves, and they'll do that for 2 or 3 years, get promoted to 3rd, 2nd, 1st officer, chief officer, and the master, but there's no one there passing on those leadership skills, that hands-on training, because there's no one there to do it. There is nobody there. They're just on that watch. That guy is standing by that radar because he's been standing there for 6 weeks doing the same thing. There's nobody else there with him. Where was the lookout? Probably doing rounds downstairs because there's nobody to do rounds. It's just there's just nobody on these ships anymore.
Well, that's the negative side. I mean, I go on a lot of ships with a lot of different crews and captains and stuff, and they're fine. They're absolutely, you get impressed doing, oh wow, this is good. It's a different, each one is unique. You get sickened by some of it, and then some of it, oh wow, look at this thing. And the people that are well trained are equal. They're from all sorts of places. So you can't. I think it's a percentage thing more than anything else. Yes, there are more accidents, but then there are a lot more shit. But you have to sort of just hope for the best, I guess. Because you can't give up your enthusiasm for it. You can't get depressed about it. Because there are many times that, in fact, more times that you are impressed than not. Within 5 minutes of going on a ship what you're going to see.
Exactly.
Just talk to a couple of people.
Which gets down,
get your knife and you're going to open up a crack.
Which gets down to the experience of the AVI.
Well, yeah.
All right. If you're experienced, most people who been involved with ships for any length of time. You walk on the ship, you get a sixth sense very, very quickly if it's a well-run ship or a junk ship. You know, you get,
It's going to be a long day.
yeah. You get, and on the subject of training, would a pilot be allowed into an aircraft, a jet, passenger jet, without having this number of hours on the thing? But the thing there is what we were saying about the guy on the sticks. Pilots don't fly them anymore. The computer flies them. So you get this feeling now. What happens if it starts to go wrong? The computer dumps or whatever.
That's why they do a lot of simulator work.
Yeah.
Just in case.
But we used to do like, they still do simulators.
But your typical SQ pilot today is doing as much simulator time as does sit time.
More simulating. I got 2 pilots in my family, my daughter and my son, flying 787. They do more simulator time than like that.
But that's comforting.
I just learned something strange the other day. I mean, my friend is an oil field helicopter pilot, and he only takes his drug alcohol test once a year. And he's flying. We go to the Macron Sea Tamarack, we go everywhere, and you know everything. But pilot, no, once a year. I'm just amazed. I've never had that before. I just thought I'd leave that forward.
Any final points for Joe? Otherwise, I think it's probably time to go and get a bite to eat.
You're well over your,
No, it's Joe, it's fine.
well over your time now. That's it.
I would like to thank you personally for giving us a bit of a sober insight into ISM. And it's, what can I add? I mean, I can't have much really other than to say it's really very, very important. And as I say, my sadness comes that every day still there are people dying. And I do say that, I mean, you made the point, as an eCMID ABI, as long as you can come to the end of your working day and know that you have made a difference in your small way, then I think that's really, really what it's about. And I commend you all for that. So, Joe, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, good. Oh, certainly.